to D&D. Not that D&D. I am Eller the Disciple.
I'm Tally the Dissenter.
We're going to talk more about tools for listening.
You kind of had a different approach to this than what I expected. I took some questions to ask you, and you were looking at ways to try and transform it into something that was more of a tool. So essentially what we're going to kind of look at today is how do we think about the communication cycle. We talked about it a little bit about the back and the forth, and we send a message, the other person receives the message, and they send their message back, and it's just that back and forth. So what are there questions that we can ask ourselves when we reflect on a conversation? So this is what I kind of, not even reflect on a conversation, maybe we're preparing for another conversation. So what is something that we can do to prepare going forward, or things that we can keep in mind while we're trying to have conversations that maybe aren't the easiest things to do?
Yeah, and you asked me a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
And in going through that exercise with you, I realized that embedded in those questions are the tools to help us with the conversations.
So this is what I want to encourage everyone to do right now is I'm going to read through these questions. The instructions initially were, I think of the last couple of months, the last 3 months that we've been gone, maybe. Think about some conversations that you've had, maybe some that have gone well, maybe some that have not gone so well. It might be helpful to do a comparison between one that went well and one that didn't go well when you listen to these questions. If anything, I would say just think of a conversation you brought to somebody. You needed to talk to them about something that was maybe not the easiest thing. It didn't go as well as you would have liked. It didn't go to plan. Think about that conversation as I'm asking these questions. On the first side of it, when you're building your message, did you take the time to reflect on what you wanted to say?
Are you asking me now? So yes, I was thinking about the conversation that I had, and yes, I did. I thought about what I wanted to say before I had the meeting with who I had the meeting with.
Did you include your intentions in your message?
Yes.
Did you include the relevant facts?
Yes. Maybe not everything, but enough to have the conversation.
And did you reveal your heartfelt feelings?
I would say mostly it was a work meeting, so it's kind of the context makes a difference.
Although, this makes me ask a question. Are you afraid of vulnerability in the work setting? Do you feel it's not appropriate to be vulnerable?
Well, it's something we've been working on a lot, of being able to be vulnerable, because whether you realize it or not, you're vulnerable no matter what.
Right.
When you're having the conversation. In the regards to the answer I just gave, I was trying to stick to the topic at hand. There are some other emotions of things that were going on also in the business that I try to keep outside of it. So it's kind of almost like layers.
Right.
And so you're trying to decide, okay, will bringing in that other layer of emotion derail the conversation or be a distraction? And I made the choice that I felt like it was a distraction. So it wasn't that I wasn't willing to be vulnerable. It just didn't feel like that was the appropriate thing to bring in. So I tried to bring in what was appropriate to the conversation. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, yeah.
Okay.
I think that more than anything, we want to encourage vulnerability because there is a thing that happens sometimes where we're all afraid to be vulnerable. We respect and acknowledge when people are vulnerable to us.
Right.
Most people tend to say that they appreciate when they see somebody else being vulnerable. So it's just something to keep in mind. They think that, yeah.
In our Dare to Lead training, they've been talking about, there's even defining what vulnerable means.
Mm-hmm.
And now I wish I had that definition with me, but I don't.
Yeah.
Just sharing something that happened to you that was embarrassing is not really necessarily being vulnerable. Being vulnerable is kind of not being able to control an outcome and putting yourself a little bit at risk. They're very clear to make a distinction. If you want to learn more on that, you can definitely go check out the internet. Gotta love it. And I'll put a little plug for Brene Brown, even if she's not sponsoring us.
So when you're sending your message, did you use loaded words?
No, I tried to avoid them. Some of the examples that I'll give for this context is you don't want to be insulting. You don't want to bring up negative labels. You don't want to mislabel something because then that, again, could derail the conversation. You don't want to exaggerate. You want to try to stick to the facts at hand. And when we are heightened in our emotion, sometimes we exaggerate to build our case. That actually ends up hurting our case. So just something to keep in mind. I'll go into that a little bit more about the triggering words when I talk about the tools piece.
The next part of the sending the message, does your tone, your body language, your posture all align with your words?
I think this is really important because when you were asking me this question, I was like, yes, but some of that didn't matter because we were on a call and not in person. So I think not in person means you have to pay even that much more attention to your tone.
Especially your tone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe when we have heightened feelings, we tend to hear tone and nonverbals a lot more than actual words. And then when you are looking at the receiver, did the listener give you their full attention?
Yes.
Did they show to you that they were listening?
Yes. Well, again, it was on a Zoom, but there was certain responses that indicated they were listening.
Did they invite you to share more?
I think yes. So when we talked about this question before, I realized that they just allowed me so much space to talk that I had already kind of thought through what I was going to say. And so there wasn't a ton more to say.
Okay. Did you feel empathy from them while you spoke?
Yes.
Did they remain silent while you spoke?
Yes.
Did they seem to try and actually understand your meaning?
Mostly, yes.
Okay. And then they go back to usually initially a reply. Did they show that they understood your facts?
Yes.
Did they show that they understood your feelings?
Yes.
And now they kind of build. Now, did it seem like they took the time to reflect on what they wanted to say back?
Yes.
Did they include their intentions?
Yes.
Did they include the relevant facts?
Yes.
Did they share their feelings?
Yes.
And when they sent the message, did they use loaded words?
No.
Did their tone or body language and body posture align with their words?
Yes.
Now, when you were receiving their response back, did you give your full attention?
Yes.
Did you show that you were listening?
Yes.
Did you invite them to speak more?
Yes. I had to think. I was like, how did that conversation go?
Did you express empathy
Wow.
while they spoke?
I think so. I think they weren't really looking for empathy from me, so it might have been more in the context of just like understanding.
Yeah. Did you stay silent while they spoke?
Yes. It was hard, but I did it.
Did you try to understand their meaning?
Yes.
Now, when you were showing your initial reply, did you show that you understood their facts?
Yes, because I actually kind of repeated their facts to them, and yeah.
Did you show that you understood their feelings?
I'm not sure that really applies to that one, but I'll say yes.
Okay.
Overall. So it was a tough conversation, and I went into it with a little bit of dread, to be perfectly honest. But I had spent some time thinking about it, and I prepared myself to have feedback from them. Yeah. And I think that was really important for me because sometimes I go in with all the guns loaded and no space for anybody else to talk. I'm right. You're going to listen to me and I'm going to have my way. And it's not a productive way to have difficult or conversations, if you will.
It is a productive way to have difficult relationships, actually. What you started saying.
Yeah, you make the relationship really difficult.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
It was really one of the best feedback sessions I've had. And I didn't feel whammied. I felt like the person I was having this conversation with was very caring in their responses. and without making it an emotional.
When you say without making it emotional, I feel like there's kind of a tendency to want to ignore the fact that we are emotional
Yes.
as people.
Yes.
That emotions are a thing that we have, and I can give you a book or two if you would like to pretend like some people are less emotional than others. I can prove that is not true.
Well,
But-
and you know what? You're making a good point. I think when I'm saying without making it emotional, meaning emotion didn't hijack the day.
That's
It was productive. We dealt with the emotion in that context, and it felt really freeing after having that conversation. Like I said, it was one of the best feedback sessions I've ever had. When you were asking me these questions as we were preparing for this, I started realizing, oh my gosh, you are giving here a great tool. But anyway, so when we met and talked about these, I was realizing it was like, these are great tools. And if, I had the luxury of it being a conversation that I had had a chance to prepare for. But as I mentioned in our previous video, sometimes you're just surprised. And if you're taken by surprise, then it makes a whole different context. And so if you have some tools in your toolkit to pull out for that surprise conversation, it can help ground you and help you to get through that conversation and it be still hopefully successful. I've had surprise conversations that all of my armor came on and I shut down, and I got through that conversation, but I was emotionally wrecked after that conversation because it took me by surprise. It didn't have the chance to talk about it or think about it, and I didn't ask for an opportunity to think about it. And that's a tool that I've learned also from the training we're getting at work. So, anyway, that being said, I wanted to share those tools with y'all. So, when it comes to you building the message, if you have the luxury of being able to think about a difficult conversation before you're going to have it, you have something come up, somebody says something to you that doesn't feel right, and you feel like you need to address it because it's one of the ways that you know something might need to be having a difficult conversation is if 3 days later you're still thinking about that conversation and you're like, I don't like that they said that to me. They're mean and they don't like me and I don't like them. And all these, I don't know what else you would think, but these are things sometimes I think. Then you probably need to actually take this is a saying that maybe you don't know, the bull by the horns.
I know that saying.
You know the bull by the horns? Okay. Take the bull by the horns and you set up some time to meet with that person and try to resolve it if you trust them to have the resolution. And I was lucky in the example that you were asking me about. I trusted the person to talk to them. So, in building the conversation, think about what you want to say. State your intentions. Include appropriate or fitting information. And express your honest feelings. And one of the ways that one of my therapists used to say is, or say what you think, say what you want to happen, and let go of the outcome. In building the conversation, think about what you want to say, state your intentions, include appropriate and fitting information, and express your honest feelings. Now I'm going to give a caveat to that of like, if this is a person you can trust, or based on the level of trust, because sometimes you may trust them a little bit, and so you can probably do, the intentions and the information, and maybe feelings is a little bit like, okay, if I go to feelings, then they're going to dissect that apart, and I don't want to do that. So it's something that you're going to have to gauge, I guess, is what I'm going to say about that. And then as you're then kind of crafting that conversation, what I did is I actually had some bullet points on a piece of paper, and I was like, I want to start with this, I want to talk about this, and then I'm going to ask this question. That's how I laid it out. And the laid it out question, that last question is me letting it go because that was when I was prepared to get the feedback for that question. Okay, but as you're doing that, then you avoid the triggering words. One of the words that is the biggest triggering word, you may have heard this before, is you. You did this thing.
Oh, yeah.
You don't ever want to start with
I
that.
statement.
You want to use an I statement. I am curious about why this happened. I am wondering if we could talk about when this was said, and you actually just skip altogether saying the word you, because that can be a triggering word. And then I've also talked about like negative labels, like labeling something as stupid or dumb or irresponsible, giving insults, exaggerating or overstating. We want to keep to the simple facts. So, like in the writing that I'm learning about doing at school, they're telling us not to use too many adverbs. I thought that was interesting, or adjectives. I always get those mixed up. As you're having that conversation, think about your tone, think about your posture. And one of my favorite thing is I've heard this one speaker, he get really passionate about something, and he would say, "Why am I shouting?" And it's like, it helps me because sometimes I'll notice my voice is getting louder, and I'm like, in my brain, I'm going, "Why am I shouting?" And then I've got a little chuckle in my brain, and it brings me down. It is the thing that helps me go, okay, I can do this. I can calm down.
You haven't shared that with me before.
But you do this to me when you're like, okay, Mom, you're being a little loud. And it's like, why am I shouting? And then I smile, and then I'm like,
it's so funny because you say that, and I think of Tim Curry in Clue going, "I'm not shouting! Okay, I'm shouting! I'm shouting! I'm shouting! I'm shouting!"
Yeah.
And then clunk on the head with the candlestick.
Oh, foo-foo.
That's great.
After you speak, then you start to observe the recipient. See if they're paying attention to you, because if you feel like that they're not paying attention to you, there might be something to just make a note of for yourself. Are they asking you for information or inviting you to bring more information? Are they showing empathy or understanding, trying to understand? So kind of as you're trying to give them your attention, you might be like looking for these pieces. Instead of trying to craft your answer, you're giving them your attention. You're seeing if they're trying to understand. And that, I think, operates a different part of your brain than you're sitting there trying to think about, well, now that I've said this thing and they're going to respond, you know, what am I going to say to their response? So
it's that listening to understand, not listening to respond.
And for me, this is going to be really helpful because I feel like when I'm trying to listen to somebody else, and just like these few little things, just having that in my body, they paid attention to me.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean for me? That probably means I should pay attention to them, right? Like it's a reciprocal courtesy or a mutual conversation. It also means, and this is a worst case scenario, but I want to mention it. If they were not listening, right, I might have to repeat something. But if they're not trying to understand, that might mean I need to stop the conversation. And it's okay to recognize that. It's not always easy to recognize that, but this is a tool that I've been trying to build for myself of like, oh, okay, I've caught you at a bad time for this conversation, so I'm going to stop. Because maybe in this case, you've caught them by surprise. Maybe it's not a scheduled meeting like the one I had that I was thinking of. And so that's important. Now I'm thinking of a whole nother conversation where somebody got really mad at me because I surprised them with heavy conversation. So it's something to take in consideration. If they cannot give you your attention and they're not ready to understand that it's probably a bad time, and you need to probably just say, you know what, let's put a pause on this. It's a thought. Okay, so then now they have listened to you, and you've seen that they're listening to you, and you're going to continue with the conversation, and they're now speaking, and you're listening. So then, like I said, be reciprocal. Give them your attention. They gave you their attention. Even if they didn't give you their full attention, you know that ideally you would like full attention, so give them your full attention. Because you are indirectly setting a boundary by doing that, and a precedent by doing that. And if you cannot be present in that case, or this started happening the other way around and they took you by surprise, I am very much a supporter of circling back. And like I said, I'm still trying to learn that. But if you cannot be present to the conversation...
Can we reframe that? Some of us have, like...
You don't like the circle?
No, some of us just are so tired of the corporate jargon. We want other
well, that's
stuff.
fair. So, time out. Does time out work for you?
Well, I don't think that you should say that, depending on who's the other person, but just to say, hey, I'd like to talk about this more, but I can't right now, or can we schedule a time to sit down and talk about it?
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. And then, you can give them your full attention. You're ready to have the conversation. You're going to proceed. Then, how will you illustrate to the sender you're listening? Now, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in one of our other episodes. Yeah. But, just being mindful of, like, I want them to know I am listening, and how will I do that? And then, can you ask for more information and invite them to share more if you need more? And remain silent while the sender speaks. Now, this is super hard for me. And most of my job is meeting with people and letting them tell me what they do. And so I have to not interrupt a lot of times. And that's not easy for me.
It's not easy
So,
in general.
What is nice is the tool that we use has this lovely control over the microphone, and I can mute my microphone. And since we're not meeting in person, they don't see that while they're talking, I am writing notes about the things that they're talking about and what questions I want to ask them. Now, sometimes they will answer the question if I give them enough time, and sometimes they don't answer the question, but I'm writing notes. So if you're somebody that really struggles with interrupting people, write notes. That's my suggestion. If that doesn't work for you, hopefully you can figure out a different thing that will. But being able to remain silent, that is such an amazing conversational courtesy that would go so much to hospitality and mutuality in our conversations.
Well, I think this kind of ties into... So, when I was doing the class, kind of at the end of the first day, I had a couple of key takeaways I had made notes of. I had written, like, one of the notes I had on there was, silence is golden. It's just, like, that very cliche. Mm-hmm. But it was just a note that I felt like I needed to also write for myself. I know I also have a tendency to interrupt, and part of that is a neurodivergency thing. This is the one thing that throughout some of this, I might talk a little bit about how somebody who is neurodiverse will vary. A lot of the stuff in that class it's backed up by data, science studies, all these things. But I would love to see them talk about neurodiversity and how it works, because our brains just work different. In general, I think I told you recently, I learned that neurotypical people don't understand questions. Or...
What?
Yes! This is this whole thing about when they will say, well, why did you do that? They don't actually want to know why. But we think, like, when you're neurodivergent, like, well, you're trying to explain what your thought process was and why you did something. That question isn't actually inviting an answer. It's wanting you to feel shame for your behavior. Like, why did you do this thing? And neurodivergent people don't see it that way because that's not how we work. We think you actually want to know why we made the decision we made.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, that's probably the hardest one, is the remaining silent. And it is good. It is golden.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind.
Yeah.
So, and then, can you cognitively empathize with the sender? And I wanted to talk a minute about cognitive empathy. It is something I recently learned in the training I'm having at work, in that cognitive empathy is mentally thinking about what it must feel like without being in the feeling. So an example of that is, oh my gosh, you saw your dog got hit by a car. And then you instantly think about your own dog and getting hit by a car and how sad that would feel. That is being in the feeling with them. Whereas cognitive empathy goes, oh my gosh, you saw your dog get hit by a car. And I can't imagine what that would feel like. So you don't go to that place mentally that you're like, oh no, what if it was my dog and what would it feel like? You just think about it in more of a mental image.
Yeah.
So it's a good distinction, because we can get empathy fatigue if we try to always be in the feeling and we put it into our personal context. So cognitive empathy is almost a discipline to kind of manage your mental energy, if you will.
Preventing burnout.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then think about what you will do to try to understand the message. Again, this is where you're not trying to think about a response. You're trying to understand the message. And so, the note-taking might also come into handy. What is their message? What are they trying to tell me? My boss was giving me feedback, and I didn't want to take it, but I was listening, They're giving me feedback. That's what I wrote. I was like, they are giving me feedback. And that was like, I'm going to listen to the feedback. It was no longer about trying to dissect the emotions of like the words that they said and make some kind of case against why they were wrong. It was, they are giving me feedback, and I can accept it as that. So, thinking about when they did speak to you, did they use triggering words? Because as much as you don't want to, if they did, you need to have an awareness of how that's going to impact your listening. Because if they used triggering words and they said you, and that got you upset because you felt accused or blamed, and it makes you defensive, for example, you have to be aware that you're getting in a defensive mode, and kind of like what I said is, okay, go to the message then, and not the word, so that you can divert your energy to paying attention to the thing that needs to be paid attention to, even if it is difficult. So that's how I kind of converted all those questions that you had into some tools that I could use. And I would even summarize these more. I'm going to probably get it down to an index card for myself, because some of this I already have in my pocket, but some of it I don't.
Right. And what we want to do is have something similar. We're going to make like a PDF to share.
Yeah.
And we'll just have it on like a Google Drive that you'll have access to, just to view it. And, well, we'll just put a link. We'll put it in the description below so that you have something. Or even if we look at like your index card, maybe what we could just do is like put just the notes from the index card on there so that you could copy and paste it and put it into a format that makes the most sense for you, because I'm fully I believe sometimes we need things in different formats because we look at things differently.
Well, and even like the words, like for me, I could summarize with a few words, and that means something to me. But to somebody else, those words don't work.
Right. They would have to have something different.
Yeah. But that's what I got out of it, and I really appreciate it. I feel like it was really good tools. It kind of blended very nicely with what I'm already learning at work.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Hopefully, it was helpful for everyone out there to kind of reflect a little bit on how you have these conversations. Maybe it gives you a little bit of a chance to ask yourself, like, is there somewhere that I'm noticing I have a weakness that I can work on? Because again, we only have control on our side of things, right? So if we are doing the best we can to project what we want to see in others, then hopefully we're showing a role model to other people. As they have these conversations with us, they see somebody that they want to emulate. They're like, okay, well, I really felt heard when this person said, okay, well, let me just make sure that I understood. So what I heard from you was these things were happening and that this has caused X outcome, you know? So even somebody, like something like that, where you run into somebody that summarizes like that, and you might think, oh, I really like this. This is a tool for you to use in the future, you know?
Yeah.
So I was just trying to give another example of a way you might take tools.
Yeah.
And it just gives you a lot of options. We're thinking we're probably going to be about 4 to 5 episodes overall in this listening series. And we say 4 to 5 because the last one could be long enough to need to be 2 parts. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. But whatever you're facing in the days ahead, just know that we're rooting for you. We wish you the best. We wish you all the strength and bravery, courage, curiosity, and support that you need, and that you'll find it with you.
So, yeah, please, like, subscribe, come along for the rest of this, and we will see you next time.
Bye.